Hey, team players, welcome back. Love that we're getting comments before we're starting out on today's episode. Really excited for today. Gonna have a lot of great answers and bringing it to you. Jesse, Carlo, we see you're already in here. First one starting up here by George. We're jumping right into it today. Need help for the weeks. Need two receivers and a flex from Cooper, BTJ, Hopkins, Waddle, Bucky, Mason, and Parasol. All right, so we have Mason ranked incredibly high. He's ranked as our number one running back for this week. So for that regards, these are all going to be obviously bases if he plays. Today's Tuesday, but Mason's going to be the first in the tank. We haven't, like I said, rated as the number one back for this upcoming week. The next one we're going to go with from that list, my gut's going to tell me that you're probably going to want to go with Tank, but let me just clarify that real quick before I give false information here. That's the joy of when we're going through it, making sure that we're always given the most detailed, accurate information. You got to look at it from a lot of different angles, and that's what we really do to bring it to here. So scrolling through the list here, yeah, Tank is going to be the next one there. So that's your answer there for a quick hitter. Mason for sure on your flex. Tank is going to be one of your receivers, Tank Dell, and then the other receiver, unless no, that's Tank's Bigsby as your running back there. So that ain't going to work for your receiving room. For out of those four receivers of Cooper, Thomas Jr., Hopkins, and Deontay Johnson, it's going to be Brian Thomas Jr. and Cooper. On a side note, one of the interesting things with Deontay Johnson is spending so much of his career and then getting traded to another team within that same division. You really get to see the true opinion as far as what they think about them. The Ravens have had a great coaching staff throughout the years, and now they get to have this tool and truly get to show you what they thought of them. Very interesting there. So, CC, we got your deep dive. Let's jump into these quick hits here. Jesse, shoot away, man. Glad you're here. Wanted the opinion on the trade that you did today. No problem, man. So you traded Tracy and Brown for CMC and Waddle. You're down at receiver. Your running back one wasn't great since you lost Moss. All right. So Bob, this is a trade review question. He moved Tracy and Amah for CMC and Waddle.
Oh man, Carlo, I see you wanting to shake some things up there, and without knowing what the rest of your team is on paper, I see that as potentially being a great move for you. But also in the same respect, I think that this is one of those positional value questions, right? Where you're giving up a running back with a lot of potential, a wide receiver with a lot of potential, though that potential has not materialized yet this year. And then there's those two studs in that conversation. I would have rather had Tracy and St. Brown and tried to move St. Brown for something else. But I think you're not going to be upset, especially if CMC comes out and is lighting the world on fire. I might.
Well, Carlo, this. I am a pure and unabashed running back whore, and I love that trade. So
yeah, I might have tried a different avenue, but I still think could be profitable, Carlo. I really do. Zach Moss killed a bunch of us, I think.
And he killed a lot of everything. All right, so let's get into our first DD of the day. CC, with Brees and Kyron as your backs, and they are also handcuffed, which is great. A higher priority than keeping a decent depth on the bench. Your bench is Flower, Olave, Monte, JMO, Chubb, Laporta, Hunt, and Pacheco. So basically, Bob, this question is, should he go out and get his handcuffs or keep some of those guys? Well, I definitely don't want to get rid of Monty. I can tell you that as a starting point. And here's part two of his question. Well, bench depth doesn't necessarily win championships because it doesn't. My thought was a Monty, Hunt, Pacheco fill would be better than inserting one of the backups, either Braylon or Corlin. And, quite frankly, dude, you're right. The just not going to a super deep dive about it. The starting point is you're right. Monty's going to give you more than Braylon Allen, and the Chiefs running back system is going to give you better than Corum or Aaron, for that, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I mean,
so
to
I
be
go
honest,
with that being the right way to do this.
To be honest, CC, to operate under the assumption, and I mean, Braylon looks like he's going to be a nice running back, and we haven't really seen what Corum is capable of yet in a full game this season. So while it is frightening when one of your main backs goes down, and we've experienced it all this year at the very minimum. When one of your main players goes down, searching for that backup, and we've all been put into bad situations this year. But I think what needs to be said, especially for you, is that Monty, Chubb, Hunt, Pacheco are going to be perfectly more viable than the combination of Braylon and Corum. Now, we can say, we can position ourselves in that framework that if Breece were to go down, Braylon Allen will have Breece Hall-ish value. That's not necessarily the case. And if Kyron were to go down, that Corum would have Kyron value. That, we don't know that right now. And that is not something I necessarily want to bank on as I shift my mindset towards the fantasy playoffs. I want to find the best players for my team. I want to find the best matchups and players for the home stretch. And I want to make that my priority. Maybe I want to get one of those guys, right? Maybe the guy that I want might be Corum, and maybe I don't want to mess around with JMO, right? Maybe that's how I operate, but it's not a necessity. And as it goes, when looking at that bench, that wide receiver situation outside of Flowers with JMO and Olave is probably going to be a little bit frustrating down this road that we're taking into the playoffs, because Olave's already nailed himself with 2 concussions, maybe will wear the Guardian cap. And JMO, we know what JMO is. JMO is a guy that isn't going to get a super amount of volume because they don't have to give him that volume. And he is going to be, at the very minimum, he is one of the biggest boomer bust players that we have in the NFL today. And the amount of volume that he got over the first 2 weeks hasn't translated to any rest of the week. So he's going to be your 3, 4, maybe 5 target guy. Maybe he catches 2 to 3 balls, and maybe he gets 65, 80 yards or a touchdown. He is one of those players in the similar value range of, for me at least, in the Keon Coleman's of the world, that doesn't give you a standard enough floor to make you want to start him over certain other guys. But I also feel he's also in that same conversation as Jalen Waddle, right? It's these situations, while they're not mirrors of one another, are struggles. So, and with Laporta there as well, CC, you've gotten yourself 2 players that are not as volume-based as you want them to be. And as you insert them into your lineup, you're hoping for touchdown or bust almost every week with certain guys. And while that's not always the worst thing to think about, it is something to think about when you're thinking about potentially your team becoming destabilized, right? So if Kyron or Breece were to get hurt, and now all of a sudden, and if I didn't have Monty or Chubb or Hunt or Pacheco, and I had to start Corum, I don't know if I could trust Corum plus a bunch of guys that have a very high degree of boom bust with it. It's okay to have a couple of them on a week-to-week basis. That's how you're going to win certain matchups. But I'm not sure the true value of keeping JMO or Laporta right now on your team. While I still trust Laporta for putting up decent-ish numbers on a week-to-week basis, he isn't what most people thought. And coming back into the offseason, I went out and got Laporta in a trade. It was a very easy-peasy trade to make. But prior to that, I explained to everybody here, and I explained to Joe, that I just didn't trust Laporta's value this year because there was not really any upwards potential. And we're seeing that. We're seeing a team that is really grounded, and that's a good thing for the Lions. And there's no reason for it to change. So
they're dropping a million points every week.
I think Joe's exactly right that Monty is one of the most valuable. If you can have him as a running back 3, He's one of the most valuable running back threes in the game of fantasy football right now.
It's same with Hunt because you're running Hunt or Monty as your flex every week. So, CC, I guess this is my answer overall. I'm certainly not doing straight cuts of anyone on your team.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to do effectively a 2-for-1 trade where you are upgrading one of your starters using one of these bench pieces and then throwing either Braylon Allen or Corum on the back end to truly make it a 2-for-2 trade, but in reality, it's a 2-for-1 trade, I'm okay with that because you're upgrading your starters, but I'm not okay just trying to willy-nilly because you have a lot of strength on your bench, particularly in the Kansas City running room and Monty, as Bob just pointed out. That's the only real way I would want to do that. But that being said, I'm not really looking to run out of either Hill or Hunt. I think as the combination of one of them is definitely starting your flex and the other one gets to be essentially a handcuff, I kind of like where your team's at. I want to move Flowers or JMO, but the rest of them I think I'm just sitting with or moving.
And I think
because I mean you're not going to get anything for Chubb at this point. So I mean that's it.
Arturo,
should I trade CD? I want it. We're still big on CD moving forward. No, I want it.
Yeah. I mean, Arturo, here's the point that needs to be made is back in 2022, going back and looking at the stat sheets, he didn't play that bad with Cooper Rush. So while Cooper Rush isn't a world beater by any stretch of the imagination, and Dak isn't really a world beater this year, every other year, Dak is an every other year quarterback, it feels like. But when you look at the situation here, the only thing scaring me off of CD is the injury. But I think for the time being, at least right now, until we hear anything different, he's a locked and loaded still number one wide receiver. And I wouldn't trade him unless I'm getting back a locked and loaded number one wide receiver or a combination of a wide receiver 2 and a running back 2 as well. So that's where I fall on that, Arturo. And we can talk more about CD if you want to deep dive it later. Gordon, this week, Ramondre or Chubb, Mooney or Downs? I think that Mooney is a little bit more trustworthy at this moment in time than Downs is. One of the things about...
we have Downs much higher than Mooney, though.
I get it. I understand that. And this is why this is a big question. And it's going to be a big question for a lot of people this week. When we look at Mooney, Joe, who is Atlanta playing this week? Just I'm still getting out of my work mode for the time being. Can you pull it up real quick for me?
Atlanta is squaring up against. Scroll up another list. Atlanta has the ATL is playing. Sorry about this. I'm blanking it. Looking at my gambling list, which is written differently than my other one.
All right, they're playing New Orleans this week.
Atlanta's at New Orleans.
Yeah,
and that should be a 2.5 point spread.
I think realistically speaking that Mooney is in a good enough situation, especially thinking if London is going to, London has the hip flexor thing. That could be something that comes into effect even if he plays this week's game. You saw Mooney's volume go up when London went out. So I know what the stat sheets say, but I am on Mooney. He does well against these coverages. And I think if we took a little bit of a deeper dive, we would find out that Mooney is probably going to produce, if not similarly as Downs. I think that he's more trustworthy right now than Mooney or than Downs at this moment with Joe Flacco, even though we were really big on Downs last week. As it goes to the other situations here at running back, I've heard, although it's not been confirmed yet, that Jonathan Brooks has a chance to come out and play this week. And while
that changes everything he does.
While Ramondre Stevenson is not a studly running back, he hasn't been. But what I'm concerned about in this game with the Bears are susceptible to the run, but Drake May is probably going to struggle against this secondary. And I fear that there's not going to be those dink and dunk touchdown opportunities for Ramondre Stevenson. So with all that being what it is, I would probably my initial lean today on Wednesday would probably be Chuba and Mooney. And I know Joe is probably on Downs and Chuba to go along with that. So
that's right.
There's still a lot to take in about all four of those situations, to be honest with you, Gordon. Carlo, you're welcome. Absolutely. We are always here to help. Tyler, Bears or Chiefs defense? I honestly don't think you could go wrong with the Bears defense this week. I know they kind of got lit up last week. Their defense is getting healthier. Joe believes in the Chiefs this week.
Sure do.
I think more so what you need to look at, Tyler, is that I believe we talked a little bit about this last night. If your defense is -3 points for a touchdown, 1 point for a sack, and then 7 points for turnovers and stuff, I think you're more likely to probably get that out of the Bears than the Chiefs, but the Chiefs are more likely to probably keep the score down a little bit more. So if you get more points from that, I would roll with that. Craig, Josh Downs or Pickens? My other starters are Zay, Devonta Smith, and Debo. Love the fact that you got those 3 solid starters there, Craig. Those 3 starters are probably going to be a nice carry for this week. All those matchups are really good on paper. We've looked at all those matchups recently. They're really good on paper. So out of Pickens or Downs, who do we play? I know what the Commanders matchup provides for players, but I am a bit concerned about volume in that game for George Pickens,
which is fair.
So, while I said I liked Mooney on the other side, I'd probably roll Downs over Pickens in this one. I think that Najee is going to have a better game than people expect for him to have, based upon what I'm seeing from the stats. Joe, what do you think?
So I think Pickens is going off. Again, I mentioned this yesterday, Craig, that Pickens has the most points out of any single player taken away due to penalty. Now, granted, some of them are his penalties, but he does have the most by a pretty considerable amount. When you look at that, we have him ranked as a top 10 receiver this week. I think that he's definitely a must start in the Pickens community as far as looking at that.
Pickens community.
As far as the rest of your guys, we got Debo ranked up there as well. So that's where I would go if I had to pull one of them out of your rotation there. It's probably going to be Devontae, because this Baltimore game might be the highest scoring Thursday night game of the year. Baltimore can't stop the pass that saves their life. Cincinnati only passes it. I think we're going to have a ton of points Thursday night.
You would start Pickens over Devonta Smith?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. That's very bold.
I think Pickens is going off. After the bye, him getting the whole you might not be the guy now.
That's a pro.
The guy's a head case. You got to play into it.
That's a pro Pickens stance. The reason I like Devonta Smith more is because A.J. Brown's situation is still not certain yet.
That's true too, but I still think there's a good chance he's a game time decision, and I don't want to get screwed on a game time decision when my roster's locked.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. That's fair. You think Devonta Smith's going to be a game time decision, or
no? I think A.J. Brown's going to be a game time decision.
Yeah, that's fair.
The difference between being the number 1 and the number 2 is pretty massive.
Yeah, but you don't have to roll Pickens out. You can roll him out later. Start the Giants, Eagles, or Falcons defense this week.
But they're both 1 o'clock games, so I wouldn't know until kickoff.
All right, so 3 defenses here, Nick. I believe you shared your scoring with us the other day. How I fall on this is, there is reason to believe that the Falcons would be a good enough selection this week. I know what we all say about the Eagles. The Eagles is probably a good choice too, but I'm not willing to buy into that yet at this point this week. So if you were to tell me today which defense would I rather have, depending on scoring, if sacks were a big part of your scoring, I'm on the Giants. Trevor Lawrence said he was feeling a little bit banged up. They signed C.J. Beathard. The line already isn't that good. They do generate a lot of pressure. I feel like there is a good chance that they could get a takeaway in that game and keep that game low scoring. The Giants have a decent enough. They have a good pass rush, which allows their secondary that is not that good to be decent enough. I would be on the Giants, then I would be on the Eagles, and then the Falcons in that order.
So, Nick, you did a very good job of selecting teams that are broken that you're playing there. We have the Eagles and Giants both projected to put up some of the lowest points allowed for the week overall. So, good 2 starting points there. To me, it fundamentally comes down to which offense do you think sucks more, of Dallas or Carolina. I don't think there's a single weapon on Carolina that can hurt you more than one drive. Hubbard will give you a good first drive of the game, but that'll be about it. And the thing is, Philly could make Dallas get into a pure passing game, but then at the end of it, they can also let up garbage time points, which happens. Yeah. So it's a different way of getting to the same answer, but I would go with the Giants as well.
But yeah, I mean, I spoke about Jacksonville because Philly played Jacksonville last week, but it's the same thing applies. I mean,
Dallas is screwed.
You've seen against the Panthers. Giants are playing Panthers. I misspoke. I thought they were playing Jacksonville this week because I was thinking about Philadelphia last week. But again, the same.
That Giant game's in Europe.
Yeah, it applies the same
weird
way.
Like that.
It applies the same way. Adam Thielen isn't healthy yet. They got rid of Deontay Johnson. Their only wide receiver that's really healthy and has experience now this season is Xavier Legette. That you're rolling out Chuba and Jonathan Brooks. The line isn't that great. I mean, this is a team, the Giants, I think, I'm ready for a letdown from the Giants in this game. I really am. But they are a sack city team. I believe they have the most sacks this season. I'm going to check on that as
they do.
The next play.
And Bryce Young isn't exactly what you would call a great processing quarterback. Just a fundamental fact of the game. You guys can look it up yourselves. So Chase Brown or Tracy this week. I got Amon-Ra, Devontae, BTJ. Who do I start out of these 3 receivers as well? So starting point, I'm going with Tracy. So Chase Brown just gets the new running back added to his lineup. He's not getting 25 touches again. I think you just saw the peak of Chase Brown last week. So I'm going with Tracy because I love the volume machine. Quite frankly, I think he might be a fundamentally better football player. If they switch teams, Tracy would be a no doubt. And then in terms of your receivers, I think you have them written in the right order. And just the fundamental spot there with Ahmad, Devontae, and then Devontae.
Yeah. From my perspective, I do agree with Joe. It is very difficult. It is very difficult to bench Chase Brown after that blow-up game. I completely understand it. And after Tracy having what seemed like a good matchup and not producing, that can be a little bit scary, right? I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, and it might seem like a mad scientist move to do that, but the matchup has been the matchup, and where this is a little bit different than say Denver against Carolina is that Tracy is primarily that volume rusher, and you saw what Kamara did when Olave went down and became the volume rusher. I'm not saying that Tracy and Kamara are the same player, but what I am saying is this team is not very good at defending that rush, and Tracy is actually a pretty decent running back at that point in time. As it goes to these wide receivers, there's reason to believe that Devontae Adams will have a good game this week, along with Devonta Smith and Amon-Ra, and BTJ kind of is on the odd man out in that refrain. So I do agree with Joe, at least today on Wednesday, that's kind of the order that I would fall for it. The thing that worries me about BTJ this week is that the matchup is good enough, right? We saw the Minnesota is capable of getting beat deep. They do run a lot of blitzes out of the zone coverage. We all know that that's true. This goes back to what I said about Trevor Lawrence, just about in the wrong place, right? He's banged up. Mm-hmm. The line's not good. They're not good at protecting him. So I don't know how much time he's going to have. And this is the same circumstance that Joe Flacco was in last week. Joe Flacco is a professional that's been in the league for a long time. He should have been able to process those things, and he didn't. And so the game that we were projecting for Josh Downs to have didn't happen because Joe Flacco wasn't able to do the thing that the quarterback needs to do, which is read that and then get the ball out. And I don't think Trevor Lawrence is going to be able to do that this week, even though the matchup is very, very juicy. So I am on those same three guys as we sit here on Wednesday.
There you go. Jess, we got your DD. You'll be up here in a second. Jumping over here to Tyler.
Should I grab?
Should you grab Herbert? I'd rather have Herbert. Just straight up. I'd rather have Herbert. But again, as I've said many times before, and I will repeat it again, I'm a running back whore. I also think that there's a very real chance that Herbert has blow-up potential, that if he starts stealing these touchdowns and takes Moss's role completely, I think he's going to be a starter in no doubt capacity. And I don't think you're ever going to be happy about putting Leggett into your lineup.
Well, I think if you need a starter today, Tyler, that it's Leggett. Leggett is now all of a sudden the number one wide receiver on this team. So while that's not such a great position to be in with Bryce Young, there is the opportunity to succeed. So I'm on Leggett, but I think that Herbert probably will have more long-term value, especially in the back half of the season potentially. But both I'm not enthused about, but I would lean Leggett. I did pick up Herbert because Leggett wasn't available. And you know,
there's something about fresh legs mid-season.
And we see everybody
Chicago did not use him.
We see everybody joining us here. We're going to get to all the questions. Nick, is starting Dobbins, Bijan, and Tracy a good play this week instead? And instead play Amon-Ra and Devonta Smith as my two wide receivers. Nick, you know, there is a good discussion to have that, like we said, Tracy is one of those must-start players this week. And I don't think it's going to be the red herring that Javonte Williams was, just based on, you know, what we're seeing out of
He's
Tracy.
infinitely more talented than Javonte Williams
so far. When it comes to Dobbins, Joe, how do you feel about Dobbins? Rolling out Dobbins.
So popping over to our rankings here. I remember Dobbins being pretty good on him. Just to be starting point here. Let me pop over to it.
I'm looking up on my
Dobbins. Sorry, guys, you get to see the technical difficulties as Comcast once again. Yeah, dude, Dobbins is fourth on our list for running backs this week.
Yeah.
So Dobbins.
Yeah, there's when we look at where the Chargers are, you know, Tennessee as a situation here, they do let up a good amount of yards before contact, and the Chargers create a good amount of yards before contact. I see this as being a really good matchup for Dobbins. I would be more than okay ruling out Dobbins, Bijan, and Tracy in a week. And the fact that you have the ability to do that tells me that your team is really solid, Nick.
Sure does.
And that I think you're going to be in a good situation this week by starting those three guys. Yeah, and we could talk more about that later, but I think that that's a really good position to be in. Would you drop Johnston or Robinson for Mike Williams, or keep these two? If that is DeMarcus Robinson, the wide receiver for the Rams, I would consider dropping DeMarcus Robinson, wide receiver for the Rams, for Mike Williams.
Orbit's the one, yeah.
But I wouldn't drop
Quentin Johnston. I don't want to cut Quentin Johnston, though. Because with Mike Williams, he's run blocker. He's not going to get on the field enough to be able to represent. Quentin Johnston doesn't come off the field. So I don't want to get rid of a guy who has incredible snap counts for an unknown. So that's where I would say I want to keep Johnston for sure. And then, you know, Bob, you make a compelling case for Robinson. You're one Puka ejection from having a big week again. So, you know, I like the Rams offense overall more than the Steelers offense anyway. So I would probably just find someone else to cut, or just let Mike Williams sit on the waiver wire for a week.
Yeah. I mean, and as far as that is true about, I mean, if it's one Dale, I mean, if it's Wan'Dale Robinson, then it's a different discussion, right? He's still highly targeted, but it's a very low ADOT. He's not really doing much with the targets, so it's very limiting. And Demarcus Robinson, again, is one of those players that really has the situation kind of all in front of him. If there's an injury and he can take it, he can do really well. But at that same point in time, only 38 targets in the games that he's played. It's not like it's in the same realm as Tutu. So I can see why Mike Williams will be a good play, but it could still be worth waiting on because the situation is unclear. MT, Cedric Tillman, a hold, buy, or sell? If sell, for what? Draft picks. Honestly,
I think he's a start.
Honestly, when it comes to Tillman's put up 2 really good weeks. And, there is a pathway for Tillman. And I want to talk about Tillman a little bit.
No, obviously
more,
Cleveland's not playing this week, so you're not starting him this week. I mean, clearly,
right.
But
no, I want to talk a little bit more about Tillman later, but I do think that he's a sell. And the reason I think he is a sell is because with those 2 good weeks in tow, you could potentially leverage him with another player to get into something that will have more stable-ish value in the long term.
Right? Oh, see, I think he's going to be great stable-ish value. He is the king of garbage time. Like
I'm there.
He was Cleveland's first day 2 pick post the trade. They are in on him. And the fact that he's getting that garbage time touchdown with like 14 seconds left in that game.
Remember, MT is building. So we're thinking for this year, but next year primarily. And
next year he's definitely the number 1 receiver on Cleveland. There's no doubt about it.
The question needs to remain is that will Jameis Winston continue to be the number 1 quarterback in Cleveland next year?
No, Cleveland's starting quarterback next year is not on the roster. Might not even be in the league right now.
Okay. So you are saying hold, start Tillman, keep him for next year.
I'm saying, yeah, in both redraft and dynasty. Yeah. But yeah, definitely dynasty. Yeah.
Okay. I'm on the vein that he's worth selling. You can leverage him for something pretty nice right now, especially to a contender.
It also goes back to my fundamental belief that I think draft picks, unless you're getting a running back, are fundamentally overrated in dynasty leagues.
That's fine, but MT's out of it this year. So
no, I get that, but I think Tillman can be a piece you can build around in the future and be glad that you have him.
Yeah, and that's where I disagree on. I feel like his leverage right now is at its peak because of what we know about Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston passes it to the X. If Jameis Winston isn't there, then he really has no value.
But he's going to have an entire this season showing that he's able to put up numbers, and no idiot in the world is not going to give him the ball next year when he's the only playmaker left. When Chubb is gone and they have a new quarterback, who are you giving the ball to? Him and Njoku. That's it. The team's going to suck. Don't get me wrong.
And
he'll be the king of garbage time until he goes to a different team 3 years from now, but that's where he's at, and you can score points in garbage time. Everyone knows.
What a great nickname, the king of garbage time.
That's what he is. Cedric Tillman is the king of garbage time.
I'm okay. Like I said, I'm okay moving him. I think you can leverage him for something really good. Maybe you can leverage him in a trade for a player and a pick and some picks later. I think you could probably get something really good for him. If I could get something really nice for him in the future, I would try to do it. And we can talk more about it in a couple minutes there, MT. I'd be scared to trade him being like a Josh Gordon.
Well, that's his fault there. I'm scared of him being like Josh Gordon. Well,
yeah. I mean,
that's part of rolling the dice, though.
He could also be like Puka. I mean, that is very much like Joe said, a fundamental point where you have a guy that has gotten hot in the way that Tillman has gotten hot, is that they've cleared up roster space, got rid of Amari Cooper. Jerry Jeudy isn't what they want him to be. Jameis Winston passes him the ball a lot. There's, like I said, there's reason to say that he will be good next year. And there's reason to say that he is talented enough to make it. But if you do want to sell, right now is really good time to sell because he's put up 2 explosive weeks that he's not going to get any higher, I think, value-wise, at least this season, because nobody fully trusts.
By default, he's higher value next week because you will have eaten the bye. I mean, that's by default.
Yeah, if you eat the bye with it this week and sell him next week, but again, a lot of trade deadlines are ending this week, so you're not going to have the opportunity to do that. So if your trade deadline is coming up, and if I could get, I mean, you might get someone that will sell you a second, like a couple seconds, or maybe a back end first and a front end second to go out and win this year with Tillman. I mean, he doesn't seem to be the guy that is going to fall off this year, like Joe said. He could, but again, I think that he's worth trading.
He's the piece they have to build around because literally they have no other pieces.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to this, Tyler, I do want to see Mike Williams first. And like Joe said, it very well could be that they brought in his big body to be another run blocking wide receiver out on the edges to kind of make room for Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris. Could be.
He also could just flat out be never hitting the field, never getting a hat, be George Pickens insurance too, because he's built the same way.
So there was a tweet sent out by Van Jefferson that said, "Hey y'all, I'm still making it on the field. This is George Pickens' replacement," or something like that. So, however much you like to believe player conversations on X or Twitter, it's just a fun, interesting point that a player brought up and saying, I still trust my role, and this is actually to ensure this other position, which is not crazy to think that could be something.
Tomlin's been pissed at Pickens. There is some truth to that. They're still giving the ball, but there's some definite truth to that. All right, so Victor, welcome to the party, my man.
And
you just got
London and Javonte Williams. I'm assuming that's Javonte Williams.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
I love getting rid of Javonte Williams in London. Yeah, dude, I love that trade. Love it.
If that's Devonta Smith, I really like it. K9's been disappointing me a little bit. What
other Smith would it be?
I don't know. There's a couple guys named Smith.
It's Devontae, dude. It has to be.
But yeah, I really like K9. He's been disappointing me lately, but I think with just the way that this team just passes the ball so much that I think K9 will be relevant, but that volume, the volume that he's gotten in the past might not be as it might not be there. So just temper your expectations with him. But I do like the situation for K9 better than I like the situation for Javonte. Javonte Williams has been getting a good amount of yards, but again, he's super untrustworthy. Trustworthy.
So, hey, I want to hit on this point from Tyler. When you're going for your defenses and you're looking at the opposition, I understand that, what are the Saints going to do because you'll be able to score all over them. The issue with this when you're selecting your defenses in the NFL, if you run up by a 2-score lead, they all go into prevent and let up stupid points and yardage. So I would rather have 2 defenses in a low-scoring game than one that should blow out the other. So that's just the general answer to it at the end of the day. The best defenses are the one that generate turnovers. So you look at DFS, the most expensive one this week is going to be the Chargers because they're playing Tennessee. Turnover factory and, quite frankly, low-scoring offense.
And
so that's one of the things to look at. The other part is Chargers running team. Unless you completely don't cover a receiver down the sideline, they don't hit deep bombs. So
and remember, Joe,
that's why I look at that for that reason.
When we were talking about defenses a couple weeks ago, we did mention that, over that next course of time, I think we talked about 3 weeks ago, pick up the Chargers, ride them through these next couple of weeks, and they've been putting up good amount of points. So if you did pick them up, kudos to you. And as for the Saints without Lattimore, I do like Joe and I were talking, and I do think Lattimore is going to make a difference for Washington. So that that is where that's where my caution is a little bit with Pickens as well. But the Saints without Lattimore, what I'm more worried about for the Saints is this new coach, right? Is Dennis Allen is one of the worst coaches I think that I've seen in a long time with some talented players. So the shift that this offense and the shift that this defense makes, I think, is going to be important to watch. And I don't think that, I think it's okay to run Falcons players out this week, but I'm really not trusting anything happening in the NFC South at this moment in time.
And Bob's a Detroit fan. He's seen a lot of shitty coaches.
I'm a Detroit
so there's a lot of
and Steelers fan. I'm primarily a Steelers fan, but the Saints and the Detroit, so it pains me. I mean, I've been living this life for a long time.
So IP, take 2 out of 3 in a full PPR. I mean, this is going against all the rules of thumbs, but DJ Moore's the ones I'm not playing. Because first off, it looks like Higgins is out again this week. You're going to hear that sentence a lot the rest of this year. And Gesicki filling into that role of Higgins is absolutely phenomenal.
Well, he doesn't fill into the position. He fills into that role.
He fills into the production slot, I guess is the way to say it. I saw we have a question coming out asking about the iOS with Higgins being out. Gesicki's the one who gets the volume that Higgins does. I mean, it's just the way that it is.
Yeah, and I mean, just as a note, right? This piece of data here comes from the fantasy points allowed schedule adjusted, and when you dig deeper into the stat pools a little bit more by using some other sites and stuff, the past couple of weeks that Higgins has been out, he has filled in through his role in the slot, not playing in line. He's been playing a slot role. When you look at the schedule adjusted points allowed, so we're looking at this, that, Baltimore's a team that totally to wide receivers offers a +10, right? In terms of like positional value, right, Joe? But when you look at the slot specifically, and the numbers are good for the wide as well, but when you look at the slot specifically, it's a +4.3 points in addition to, the expected. So, if Gesicki is expected to get 10 points this week with this data, I would expect him to get at least 14 because of the role he's filling in. So Gesicki, while I am concerned that the performances could be flash in the pan,
also, time out, dude. DJ Moore's on a bye.
So while
Chicago's on a bye this week.
No, they're not. They play New England, dude. So I am.
Well, then why didn't that load right?
I'm on Gesicki. I'm on Gesicki this week, IP. And while I can't tell you for certain today, which is Wednesday, if I'm on Hawk, I need to know from Minnesota is that I need to know how their tight end situation is going to shake down a little bit more, because it is very possible that this matchup could be really, 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 really good for the Minnesota tight ends. But what I said earlier this week about the Minnesota tight ends yesterday is that when is Hawk more trustworthy to roll out? If you believe it's this week, roll him out this week, and that would be 2 tight ends, which it goes against everything that we say about not starting 2 tight ends. DJ Moore might get the Christian Gonzalez treatment this week. That could go to Rome Odunze as well. It's definitely not going to Keenan Allen. So I am off DJ Moore this week, and I'd be on the Minnesota tight ends and Gesicki, which is a little bit weird for me to say. Lipsy, I don't know who to drop Kyler for, Waddle or Warren, because someone grabbed Tracy off waivers before I could get him. Lipsy, at this point in time, if those are the choices, I know what we talked about the other day. If those are the choices, I don't know if I'm super enthused to drop Kyler for either of those 2 guys. I can make a case for Waddle and I can make a case for Warren, but we were really hoping against all hope that you could get Tracy. I think that Kyler was a worthwhile drop for Tracy, but I don't think he's a worthwhile drop for Waddle, and I don't think he's a worthwhile drop for Warren. And I know that Joe is okay moving into Waddle from that. Joe, what do you think?
Yeah.
You think you'd move into Waddle?
Yeah, no, I'm totally good with that.
Yeah.
Not good with Comcast at the moment. But I'm good with that.
Because Lipsy, you have Purdy and Darnold. I mean, that's the case. Yeah, I think where I'm at right now is that Jacksonville provides such a great matchup for Darnold. And they provide a great matchup up and down the board for the Minnesota Vikings. And the only thing that, could be a concern, and you always have to check weather. Weather is something you can't take out of the equation as well. But the one thing that, could be a concern rolling out Minnesota players is that their defense might take control of this game relatively early and really attack Trevor Lawrence and that offensive line. And that could be the only thing that puts Darnold behind the 8 ball. He has an incredible matchup, and I think that I would side with him right now as we sit on Wednesday with Darnold. All the stats back up that Darnold should have a top 5 potential week out here right now. Purdy, for Purdy's case here, let me search up Purdy. As it comes to Purdy, San Francisco here. Again, the matchup is also really good, right, Joe? I think where I would lean on this one, Lipsy, is that if I hear news that Jennings is playing with a healthy Debo and a healthy Kittle, I think that I would roll Purdy over Darnold, and I think both have a pathway, given the right defensive kind of situations. I think that both have a pathway to achieve a top 6 week. So I don't think you could go wrong with either one. The only thing that would concern me about Darnold would be the Minnesota defense getting more touchdowns. And that's where I stand on that. So I would go Purdy over Darnold, especially if Jennings is playing, because Jennings will take the top off of this defense, and it will probably be
and it will help Debo as well.
This will be a nice ugly matchup where you're probably going to get like a 35-28 score, something like that. Both of these teams are very capable of scoring. Very capable. CC, we appreciate you.
By the way, I'm terrible with how much Chicago. Chicago has not been a 5.5 point favorite to a 7.5 point favorite in the last 3 years. And how is that coach not fired yet?
Jason, we got you. Quincy, we got you too.
Oh, another fun fact about Chicago: they have not run a road game on a Sunday under this administration. He's been there for 3 years. He's never won a road game on a Sunday.
And if you like what we're putting out, click the like and subscribe button. We always appreciate it. CC.
Dude, Chicago is the bane of all statistical existence. Like, oh, do they suck?
It's a struggle bus, man. It is a struggle bus.
Oh, Chicago is a struggle bus. Get the hell out of there.
CC, I mentioned Laporta. I picked up Otten 2 weeks ago, and he's been fired for me. Well, on my league Monday, absolutely, dude. He's been on fire. Should I move Laporta now if I can, or hold him to cover Otten's bye week? You hold him. Yeah. He has no value. He has no. I mean, I had a person a couple weeks ago in my home league trade Laporta and Brian Thomas Jr. Into DK Metcalf, but that was more of a Brian Thomas Jr. straight into a DK Metcalf with Laporta being like the extra side piece there. Laporta is just an extra side piece right now. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to trade him away. His value on most trade calculators, on most trade charts, and even in our data is so low. I mean, he's putting out, in the weeks where we think he's going to perform, he does get like a touchdown to save his week. But he's not, they're not passing the ball enough to account for the volume lost last year. And that's the thing for Laporta. You just hold him. You use them during Otten's bye week, and then if you want to drop them later on in the year, you can. There's just no skin off my back with Laporta. Good player though.
Yeah,
still a good player. Craig, we appreciate you, Craig. I love to see 6-3. That's one of my favorite things. I love to see 8-1 even more, or 9-0. Yoshivas or Downs? Quick hit. Higgins is doubtful. I understand.
it's still Downs.
I understand the desire to run Yoshivas. I do.
Why are we calling him Yoshi? He's the iOS. I like that one.
The iOS. I still think it's Downs. I don't. The production for Yoshivas has not been. It's not been something that is reliable enough for me to want to roll out. Throughout the whole season, he has 31 targets, 15 receptions, and that's with a couple of touchdowns. He has 4 touchdowns, and those touchdowns are some of those dink and dunkers close to the goal line. I don't know how often they're going to be that close to the goal line, and I don't think that Yoshivas will be as involved as Downs could be.
No, they're going to go to Herbert now. It's going to be great.
But again, Joe, Yoshivas is tied to the better quarterback. So there is something to say about that.
I'm not fighting that at all. But with Pittman's back injury, Downs is the best game in town by far.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to be the number 4 option in a better offense, or the number 1 option in an average offense?
Here's the thing.
And that's pretty straightforward. It's the number 1.
Yoshivas' floor is the same as Downs' floor, but Downs' ceiling is way higher.
Yeah, that's it.
So
that's exactly it.
Think that of that how you will. Eagles or Cardinals defense this week.
That's going to be the Eagles pretty easily.
I mean,
we're projecting the Cardinals to allow an additional touchdown.
Yes, yeah. So if your concern, Jesse, is about letting up points, then Arizona is a team that you don't want to probably roll with. Arizona is one of those.
Same with turnovers. Who do you think puckers up tighter and keeps the ball tighter to his chest, Rush or Rodgers?
Here's the thing. Here's the stats, and these come from Fantasy Pros. Philadelphia, 22 sacks, 5 INTs, 2 fumble recoveries, 4 forced fumbles, no defensive touchdowns. Arizona, 21 sacks, 5 INTs, 5 fumble recoveries, 8 forced fumbles. And they're basically as even as it goes, pretty much for me. I think that the Eagles could get a couple turnovers against Cooper Rush. I do think that that's a possibility. Yeah, I mean, if I had just these 2 defenses, I'm on the Eagles over the Cardinals, but I think the Cardinals are a nice DFS pick this week. Because I have A.J. Brown, but he practiced today. Yeah, I mean, A.J. Brown hopefully will play. But yeah, I would roll out Downs. I would go with Downs, Tyler, over Yoshivas. I don't think I can walk in. Even if Yoshivas has a good week this week, I don't think I would want to walk into Thursday confidently and say he's not going to get 0 points, right? I can't confidently walk into this week and say that he's going to get 4 or 5 catches, because that last week he played and he was held without a catch.
Mm-hmm.
And Higgins didn't play last week either. So even though Baltimore's garbage against the pass, that's something to consider as well. Lizzie, should I pick up Leggett or Khalil over Waddle or Warren? Again, I'm not dropping Kyler for any of those 4 guys, realistically. But if I were to order which ones I would rather have, I think in my mind, I would rather have, if I wanted to play today, probably I'd still think Waddle is worth a play today.
Yeah, no doubt.
Followed by Leggett for the same reasons we were saying about wide receivers starting on teams, and then Warren and then Khalil. I think that's the pathway that I would take for these guys.
See,
So if you did want to move on from Kyler, Waddle is good. Like, and here's the thing: if you traded Kyler's trade value would probably be Waddle, right? In the first place, for most people. And you have you already have Darnold and Purdy, so you're moving yourself out of some situations, Lipsy. So I think it's fair to move into Waddle, but
see, Khalil Herbert and Warren to me are very close because both of them have essentially the same thing going for them. They're fresh legs into a system that could give them some usage. Warren's will be for yardage, Herbert's would be for touchdowns. Yeah. But that being said, if you can get through this week without anyone picking up Khalil Herbert, I'd want to see it first before I cut Warren. Warren's one of the very few tiered backs that I don't want to cut for Khalil.
Yeah,
I want him in a lot of circumstances, but basically he's the line. If they're Warren or better, I don't want to cut him. But if they're worse than Warren, I do.
Well, this is more about picking up Joe. He'd be dropping Kyler for one of these four guys. That's
I understand that. I'm trying to figure, but I'm just putting that to the side point. If you need a starter, since this is going to be a pure depth piece, I'm going Herbert because I think he gives you the best chance of hitting a home run out of the park.
Could be.
Yeah, I just think he does.
No chance. Bones,
it's hard to leave Waddle on the table.
Everybody, smash the like if you like what we're
love you, Bones.
Jordan, need help for Brian Thomas Jr. and Goddard. What would you give? Well, starting point. I own Goddard, and I don't like that I own Goddard. Starting point.
He shows up when one of the two receivers are hurt.
Here's the problem with Goddard. When one of the two wide receivers are hurt, he also is hurt.
Always.
So you have to carry two tight ends, which has been the bane of my existence over the past couple of weeks. I picked up Conklin, Henry. Other people have picked up Otten, so it's sucked. They got to they dislike sleep more than I do. But
so Jordan, what I would say for this question here is don't pick up Goddard. Just do this as Brian Thomas for one of your pieces because Gesicki's going to put you in a much better spot. Sorry, Bob, you can keep hating on Goddard more if you want.
I'm not. I'm not hating on Goddard, but also to the point is if A.J. Brown is fully healthy and Devonta Smith is fully healthy and Saquon Barkley is fully healthy, Goddard's value is very, unless I need to start two tight ends. And here's the other thing, Jordan. Kincaid's getting volume now. He's not getting a lot of yardage, but he's getting volume. So eventually that might turn into something good for Dalton Kincaid. Hasn't yet. So everybody's a little bit more down on him. If I wanted to move into Brian Thomas and Goddard right now, I would probably want to move Higgins and Rico. That would be kind of where I'm at because, like I said, Goddard has zero value. Higgins has, value, but it's not as high as Brian Thomas right now. And Goddard essentially has no value. And then Rico had some good games. So there's a case to be made that you don't need all those running backs. You don't need Henry Kamara, Tracy, Rico, Chubb, Mason, Ray Davis. You don't need all of those guys. So Rico could be a piece that you move on from. Higgins could be a piece you move on from. Chubb, Mason could definitely be pieces you move on from. Ray Davis, where's his value going to lie? Is he going to still get? He got 2 receptions for 70 yards. Outside of that, where's that value from this week? If it were me, like I said to Joe, I would be like, okay, Brian Thomas Jr. for Higgins and Mason. See if they want to get on that, or Higgins and Ray Davis. However you feel about those guys, and move yourself into Brian Thomas Jr. I don't really think Goddard is something you need to go with. PJ, do I think Nico plays this week? I do. I do think Nico plays this week. There's been a lot of coach speak coming out from Houston to say it's not a question of if he will be activated. It is a question of when he is going to be activated. And that to me screams as if they're trying to decide if they want to roll him out this week against Detroit. And the only question would be is, do they want to take the loss against Detroit right in the head, or do they want to challenge Detroit? because they're pretty much telling us that they think this is going to be a loss. That's my perspective from what that says. It basically tells me that they're believing that they're not going to be as competitive in this game. So I don't want to bring him back and risk an injury, and I might wait until next week.
It's also a primetime game, though. I think they should bring back too. You look at them; they got pretty well stanked last week, and it was 2 weeks. It was the Thursday night game. So,
quick hitter PPR pick 2: Pickens, Dobbins, D Hop, MHJ, Najee, Bones. You're throwing out a lot of guys this week. A lot of guys that have a lot of.
I'm going Pickens and Dobbins.
A lot of value right now. My initial.
We got Dobbins as a top 5 running back, so that's the no-brainer to me.
My initial lean, is definitely Dobbins, for sure. I'm ready to get my heart hurt again by MHJ. I am ready to get my heart hurt again by MHJ. But I think my initial lean today here on Wednesday, and it's strictly based upon volume, is Dobbins and Najee. I think that Dobbins and Najee have very much protected volume, and what Washington does good against the ground game, Najee's unexplosiveness, I think, will actually benefit him in this matchup, because Washington is good against those outside guys, the guys that catch passes and stuff. He can't do that. He doesn't do that. So his volume is very much run it up the middle 2 yards, run it up the middle 10 yards, run it up the middle 4 yards.
Plot it up the middle all day. He ends up with 23 carries and 100 yards. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, and for me, I think Dobbins and Najee are going to be nice starts this week. I could see a pathway for Hopkins to have a good game too, even against Patrick Surtain. Hopkins could probably body Surtain a little bit, but I think that MHJ is the guy that will hurt you the most this week, whether you start him or not start him, to be honest with you, because he does match up well in this matchup. But this is not an MHJ thing. This is a Kyler thing. And this is a coach thing. Dobbins and Najee give you the safer floors. Pickens gives you a nice ceiling. And Hopkins gives you, you could buy into what he did this past week. If you think he's capable of doing it again, he definitely is capable of doing it again. But will he? There are questions out about that.
I want to hit on this real quick. We're going to ask a lot of questions about Pickens. Everyone's concerned about Lattimore being there now. Will Lattimore affect Pickens? 2 things about that. When you're changing into a new program, it's not like in baseball where basically you just hit the ball when you're standing here in the batter's box. It doesn't matter what the rest of the team is, because baseball doesn't really have plays like that. In football, Lattimore's essentially they're either going to play a very basic vanilla coverage style, or they're just going to put him in straight man coverage against Pickens. And Pickens is one of the better receivers in the league of separating from man coverage. So I look at it like that as saying that I don't want to play Lattimore 3 weeks from now, but playing him the first week there doesn't normally have as much fruits as it will after the fact. So in that regard, I like where Pickens at. Not to mention, Tomlin's basically undefeated playing against rookies after his bye, which has happened a lot because Cleveland always has rookies playing.
Weird stat. Weird Cleveland stat.
It's a stat. He's both of those. He has like an 80% winning percentage after his bye and a 90+% against rookies. But the point being is that this is coming up the Steelers' bye. They're going to score. It's just, do you believe it's going to be more in the air or on the ground? And given how good Washington's offense is, I lean towards the air. And that's why I'm on Pickens so hard this week.
Yeah, and that's fair. That's fair.
But back to the thing before about getting Mike Williams and Van Jefferson defending him. He's Van Jefferson. What else is he gonna do? He has to defend himself.
Yeah, right. I mean,
it's not gonna be like, now I suck.
I'm not defending Van, but Van defending himself is a brilliant heads-up play. Yeah, like I said, Lattimore's a stud player. I mean, he loves the dog on Mike Evans. When they play, there's no doubt about that. Like I said,
those two have had some hate over the years.
I differ from Joe in the refrain of Lattimore. I think Lattimore makes this tells me that Washington wants to win right now.
Oh no, I agree with that. I just don't think week
tells me that
one
Washington
Lattimore's
wants
going to be
win
as good as
right
as the
now.
third week he's there. I think realistically, you get Lattimore in there, and if he can shut down AJ Brown, you might have a new division winner. And that's why he's really there. He's not there to beat the Steelers. He's there to beat AJ Brown, which is going to be a very interesting matchup. Side story though.
Yeah.
All right, so do I trade Darnold, Wilson, Pittman for Daniels, Adams, and Marvin Harrison? Oh, your boy.
So the guy,
I'd rather have the side with Marvin Harrison Jr. Without a doubt.
The guy might want Tillman instead of Pittman. Would you still do it? Darnold, Garrett Wilson, Tillman for Jaden Daniels, Devontae Adams, and Marvin Harrison Jr. Would you still do it then?
So if it was Tillman instead of Pittman, I'm way less excited to do it.
I feel the same way.
I might simplify it though. How about we just simplify it? Why don't we take Pittman out, take Adams out, and just get a really low end scrub to justify it? Because Darnold and Garrett Wilson for Daniels and Harrison, you should get a third piece back. It just doesn't need to be as good as Adams. So lower the sights of the trade a little bit. You don't want Pittman? Okay, cool. We'll downgrade Adams, and that'll be the answer. Because I want to keep Tillman.
Yeah, and Joe has shared on multiple occasions why Tillman is worth keeping, right? And there is
garbage time.
There is reason to say that that is the piece to consider. I agree with Joe. I think if it's Tillman, that I would lean to maybe not. Maybe not, because I mean, ideally, I like Wilson more than Adams. I do, and that's where Joe and I differ.
Mm-hmm. We do.
But I like Jaden Daniels more than Darnold because he provides you with a little bit more upside. So that's kind of the varying factors.
Did you see the computer spit out like a scary high number for Daniels this week? I was so thrown off by that.
Yeah, it's scary actually. It's really scary.
Yeah.
I mean, Daniels is.
It makes me think things are broken. Now I gotta go
recheck everything. It makes me think
that
the Steelers are in trouble. Makes me think the Steelers are in trouble this week. Quincy, would you drop Bucky or Pop Douglas or Wandale or Xavier Legette for Keenan Allen, and who would you drop? I would probably drop Douglas for Allen. Honestly, to tell you the truth, yeah. I think out of all those guys, what we've seen so far from Drake May probably is going to be one of the better quarterbacks that New England has experienced since the end of Tom Brady. And so I think that there's going to be some time for him to develop.
Much.
But like Joe said, though, Douglas was one of those guys that, you didn't really have to fly off to the waiver wire to go pick up. But if Keenan Allen's on there, Keenan Allen's getting crazy volume. Well, I mean, it's volume in the same discussion as Wandale, right? Where the volume's not really doing much right now. But the volume is there. I mean, Caleb Williams still likes Keenan Allen. And for me, I'm going to take a wide receiver on a team that has, on paper, a good wide receiver schedule. Although I don't fully trust Caleb Williams. This is Joe's time to say he loves dark side. But again, that is where,
I love you, dark side.
That is where I fall on that. I mean, like Keenan Allen in terms of targets on the year is at 53rd out of all wide receivers in targets. And let's see where
Pop Douglas just shouldn't be on a roster. So I mean, that's basically what the thing is for Quincy. And Keenan Allen.
Douglas is sitting there at 48 targets, so he's sitting higher right now. But again, I would take
put it this way, Quincy. I'd rather get Khalil Herbert either way because of his upside potential than Keenan Allen's. I mean, that Keenan Allen's never been a big touchdown guy in the first place.
Yeah, but again,
so Tyler, would you start your second year downs?
I would start
for me if I'm
Even if
going
it's in the flex.
Gesicki if Higgins doesn't play. If not, I'm going Downs.
If Higgins is not playing,
That's all I'm looking at.
if Higgins is not playing, Gesicki feels like a smash start.
He sure does.
I mean,
Sure does.
You just have to know that if Higgins plays, Gesicki is probably not worth a start.
That's what I'm saying.
Like that's the discussion that needs to be had. But back on the Douglas discussion, both of those players profile pretty much the same. Joe, like Douglas and Keenan Allen, they both have similar stat profiles right now. So the discussion is,
and they're both in places that the weather's about to be shit and you can't throw the ball. So give me Clear Harbor instead.
Looking at the schedule here, Douglas has a bye week 14. They play Indy coming up soon, which is going to be nice enough for them. And then the Bears already experienced their bye. They have some matchups in Chicago over the next 3 weeks, and then matchups in Detroit, San Francisco, and then in the Dome in Minnesota. So I think I'd more likely rather have Keenan Allen than Douglas, knowing the situations are essentially the same. Armando, I have CD, Olave, Deontay, DeMarcus, hoping CD plays and Olave is more than likely out. I have to play one and drop one, Robinson or Johnson. So this is a tough one. I think this one.
I'm cutting Deontay.
I think this one is tricky. As we said earlier, Demarcus Robinson is one more Puka injury, one more discussion point away from having a relevant place on the roster.
So he also has Algier and Ray Davis as possible cut candidates because he doesn't have a defense right now.
I think that I would drop Robinson. Because I feel like right now Deontay Johnson will have value on this team, but I'm not sure where. I feel like they're essentially the same in my mind.
Oh, see, I don't at all. I don't think Deontay Johnson has any upside. He is a positional open space receiver who has no downfield threat. Lamar Jackson's best asset is downfield threat, and his worst thing is positional space passing. He's a horrible fit for what Lamar is. I think his cap is so limited. And I don't want to have him on the team.
I agree, but Demarcus Robinson's cap is limited as well.
Oh yeah, no, I guess it was I can draw a pathway to Demarcus Robinson's a dude. I can't do it with Deontay.
Yeah,
that's my answer.
I mean, he was a dude 2 weeks in a row.
That's what I'm saying. He can return to dude status. That's possible. I cannot draw a road in Baltimore where Deontay Johnson is the man.
And Armando, there you go. It's a fair point. I mean, we are opposed on this. Again, the Rams have Miami, New England, Philadelphia, and Demarcus Robinson got 9 targets last week. The week before, only 3. The week before that, only 3. And in the games where Puka missed or Kupp missed, he was more relevant, but never truly. He only eclipsed 50 yards 2 times, and his 4 out of his 5 touchdowns have come over the last 2 weeks. So
then here's who else is available: Gabe Davis, Shepard, McMillan, Noah Brown. McMillan would be the one I lean towards out of that group.
Well, I mean, I would want to know his health with the hammy.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't want to cut 2 of those guys. You only have to cut one of them for the receiver. I would rather have Robinson than that group. I guess they also answer that question.
Yeah, and then in terms of these running backs, I think that both are really good. I'd rather keep Ray Davis.
I'd keep them both. I mean, assuming it was all one combined question, I'm not cutting any of them.
No, he has to.
Oh, he has to drop one of them.
One of these for a defense.
Oh man, that sucks.
Wait.
Either you're
Armando,
in like 3 leagues, or you should be cutting Deontay Johnson.
Armando, are we only dropping one of these 4 guys? Because if I had to drop only one of these 4 guys, I can make a case for dropping Algier. over Deontay. So if I'm only dropping one of the four, Robinson, Johnson, Algier, or Ray Davis to pick up a defense, I think I'd probably be dropping Algier. And I think Joe would still be dropping Deontay Johnson. Tyler, you have Dell and Downs.
That's exactly right.
Gesicki. Your tight end is Otten. I would be okay running Otten and Gesicki this week.
Yeah, do it. Keep on and Gesicki.
I would be willing to do that. On another league for the flex, Gesicki or Ray McLeod. If Higgins is out, I'm playing Gesicki. If Higgins is out, I'm playing Gesicki. If he's in, there's reason to believe that Ray would be a good play if London is out. Laporta, Hawkinson, or Gesicki.
Man, Gesicki is taking this over.
It's Gesicki for us. The optics are there. Whether he performs to the optics, that is another discussion point. But what we're looking at from the stats is that he runs his routes over the last 2 weeks that Higgins has been out of the slot.
He runs Higgins' routes. Yeah.
He has been getting good volume, and Baltimore is a plus matchup in terms of points going towards
Baltimore's a plus matchup for any receiver. They don't cover shit.
Okay.
They just outscore.
That is what needs to be said. Of course, he's going to be running some inline matches too. Of course, that's going to play a role. But I just want to be clear to say, this matchup, even if it's just a tight end based matchup, they're still offering plus 0.4 points above expectations there. Gesicki's a good play if Higgins is out. If he is in, then maybe not. Who should I start? DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney, or Amari Cooper? Boy, this is a graveyard. Will, at one point in time, we have talked about a lot of these wide receivers, and I have said I hate getting burned more than one time on a guy, but I also don't want to get burned not playing the guy that has the best potential. Okay. Buffalo could be without Keon Coleman. They might be, at least for the last couple of weeks. Curtis Samuel has been dealing with some stuff. While I do think that Mooney has a nice matchup with this secondary, I do think that there is reason to believe, at least today, as we sit here on Wednesday, that Amari Cooper has a pathway to be successful. I hate it. I hate it a lot. But the pathway is there at the very minimum.
Amari's the one I would go with as well for those reasons. Yeah.
He has the chance to be.
Wombo, welcome back, baby. So glad you got your daylight savings time figured out. The Steelers running back is straight up problem town.
Yeah, Mr. Wombo, you know me. As a Steelers guy, there are going to be some matchups that on paper are going to be really, really bad for the Steelers.
Oh, yeah.
Baltimore doesn't necessarily give up a lot on the ground because you could just obliterate them through the air. Cleveland, again, doesn't give up much on the ground because you can get to them through the air. Right? They can do a lot of things. But what I want to just mention about Najee again is Najee is not the prototypical running back that we're thinking from a fantasy perspective and in accumulating fantasy points right now. He is the most average of the average of starting running backs in terms of a skill set. And he will just run up the middle for 2 yards, run up the middle for 1 yard. And eventually
the Steelers will do that 500 times, especially against Baltimore.
Eventually that volume will start to accumulate. And that volume might start to accumulate better in the red zone. So if Russell Wilson can go downfield against Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati, all teams that are susceptible to the pass game, if those runs from Najee end up being at the 2 or the 3 yard line, All I'm communicating about Najee is that the pathway for Najee has always been an insane amount of stupid, low percentage runs and then red zone. That has been the pathway for Najee for years.
That's the Steelers' way.
That it's a stupid way, and it's been what the Steelers have done for. I mean, just take a look at Jerome Bettis when it was in the back end of Jerome Bettis' career. You saw Jerome Bettis get 3 touchdowns and -1 yard. Like, come on, like I might be over exaggerating that game, but that was disgusting.
It was 5 carries for 3 touchdowns and -2 yards.
Yeah, it was disgusting. So Lipsy, the move you'd be making would be for depth. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to your running back room here, I don't really think you need to add Warren.
I like your room.
Yeah, I don't think you need to add Warren, and I don't think you need to, Tracy would have been the guy. Tracy would have been absolutely the guy, but I don't really necessarily think you need to do that. Can I just drop Laporta, Smitty? You could. Very well could.
I wouldn't.
If you, I mean, here's the thing. He's not starting on most teams right now. He's a bench piece on most teams right now. So
no, he's not, but he's a great staff. He's going to turn on at some point.
Yeah, but to figure when that's going to happen is going to be like getting a royal straight flush. It's going to be ridiculous to try to make that happen. I think if you need to drop him, you can. But like Joe said, I am expecting him to do a little bit better over the course of the season. Maybe in a couple weeks, come back to it in about 2 or 3 weeks. But if you need to drop him, or a guy like Mooney is still on your waivers, or you can go out there still and get a guy in the vein of a Cade Otton or a Gesicki. I would rather have Gesicki than Laporta, especially if Higgins doesn't play this week. So, just kind of thinking that out. Trying to trade for Nico before news comes out that he's playing this week. I'll gladly start some random guy off the waiver wire this week if it means getting Nico. Absolutely.
That's right.
1,000%. Joe went out there in our home league, traded a 1-for-1 to go get Nico. I was really pissed because I was trying to do the same thing, but I just hit it at the wrong time. Nico's a guy.
Right.
Nico's a guy that should be rostered, and will be a valuable piece. Just to understand that, he's dealing with a bye week coming up, right? And so that's another piece that people are scared about. So if you can go after the owner, in my other league, the Nico owner's like, nope, no chance. Sorry, I'm going to hold off what I have and play out the rest of the season. And that very well might be it. So you might have to proposition something
at this point,
higher. But I would definitely think about that. You're welcome, Bones. I mean, it's a big brain move. You just have to figure out which side of that discussion you want to be on, because the ceiling for Pickens is a decently high ceiling, despite Lattimore being a 4-time Pro Bowler. So that is the discussion to have. Hawkinson and Laporta rest of the season. Jacob, this is a really disgusting question. These are two players.
Hawk will be pretty good for the rest of the year.
That Joe and I do like. We do like both of these tight ends. But we both feel like Hawkinson has a pathway to have better success than Laporta, just because they are continuing to pass the ball. Just the thing about that Darnold that needs to be made certain is he knows who his number one threat is, and he uses them. Unlike many quarterbacks in the league that don't seem to understand who their number one threat is, Dak Prescott, right? You've got to like Hawkinson is going to be a threat, but it's a little bit of a struggle because I think we're going to get a couple more weeks of Laporta's chances to really upsell where Hawk is right now. And Hawk could turn down on the back end of the season. I think Hawkinson will have a better rest of the season. All I have to say is maintain the blanket Pickens where he goes, you go. Absolutely. I mean, that is very possible. Pickens is a handsy football player, though, guys. He's a handsy football player. He makes penalties happen on himself. He can cause penalties to happen against him as well. There's a lot of missed opportunities for George Pickens. If George Pickens has a couple more of those missed opportunities turned his way, similar to the Amari Cooper discussion that we had a couple weeks back, this could be a totally different season with George Pickens. Yeah.
Yeah, Wombo, you missed it. I'm big time on Tillman.
Like, I don't want to, like, for Jason's question, right? The guy wants Tillman because Tillman's been putting up better stats. He doesn't want Pittman. And I think that I'd just keep Tillman, Wilson, and Darnold at that point in time, even though Jane Daniels is elite. Michael, would you trade Cook and Brian Thomas Jr. for Saquon? I have a lot of wide receiver depth, and I can afford to give up both guys. I would, Michael. I would monitor that injury that Saquon's currently nursing right now, because they don't have to necessarily roll him into the game and use him at a high volume. And I think that they might be more careful with that as the season goes on. If they're in a good position, because they got them to win the Super Bowl, right? And the position needs to be made that you're giving up two really good pieces, but that's the type of trade that's going to get Saquon into your lap today. And I think if I had an opportunity to get Saquon into my lap today, and those were the players I have to give up, I would still do it.
Ooh,
even with the
get him in your lap, baby.
Injury. Lipsy, is Jonathan Brooks the hidden gem because he's back this week? He could be. I mean, he very well could be a gem. I'm not saying he's going to have a great week this week, but the question is, at what point in time does this team decide that they want to win football games consistently, right? Because
never.
Back and forth on the quarterbacks. You've got Chuba, who's a good running back, Jonathan Brooks, who could be a great running back. I think we're going to have to see at least 2 weeks of Jonathan Brooks to be confident in what his abilities and skill level is at the NFL level to want to roll him out, unless I'm struggling for pieces in a starting lineup right now. Ideally, you don't want to be starting Brooks, but eventually he could crack your starting flex position lineup over the course of this season. Tadeo, need help on a trade. And Jesse, we haven't forgotten about that deep dive from so long ago. We want to clear this queue as best as we can. We will get to that deep dive.
We just haven't never caught up with the quick hits.
I need help in a trade. Trade offer is Kareem Hunt for Zay Flowers. I have running backs Kamara, Dowdle, and Rashad White, and Mason. I am currently 3-6, and it's a 14-man league. So you would be acquiring Kareem Hunt, and you'd be giving up Zay Flowers.
A little late in the day for this one.
If you would have asked me this question 2 weeks ago, I would have said yes.
Yeah.
If you would have asked me this question 3 weeks ago, I would have said hell yes. Today, though, I don't know. I don't think I'd do that.
Yeah, I think you want to keep Zay in this situation.
Yeah, I don't think I'd do that. I do still value Kareem Hunt really highly today. That's just needs to be said to everybody. Kareem Hunt is still a guy that I back very, very.
And also, Rashad White picked it up, so I would take the side of that trade that has Zay.
Yeah,
seeing that Rashad White has resurrected his season.
I don't think I need to move out of Zay, even though I'm 3-6. But I do agree that you do need to have some more confidence in your running back room moving forward. I do agree with that. Armando, I'd drop Algier, and Joe would still drop Deontay Johnson because he is a running back guy. I think either of those two guys would be worth dropping. There is a path, but the thing is, Armando, the pathway for Algier is one ankle injury for Bijan.
That's right.
That's it. Right? And so the pathway for DeMarcus and Joe's point is very clear. The pathway for success for DeMarcus Robinson and Algier comes through one injury, one injection, one false move. The path for success for Deontay Johnson comes through Henry getting hurt, Flowers getting hurt.
I don't even think it's possible.
And that pathway is a little bit harder. So while we were hoping for
I think he could be the only receiver on that team, and Lamar still can't get him the ball.
While we were hoping for a better landing spot for Deontay, that didn't happen. What should I do if someone dropped Mason? Pick him up.
Yeah, that's Yeah, that's pick him up. What
If
the hell kind
someone
of question is that, Tyler? It's pretty
if
basic. Get him.
someone dropped Mason, pick him up. And I think right now that I would be comfortable if I had Wandale Robinson on my team, I would drop him for Mason, I think. Just as a speculative, unless I'm starting Wandale, right?
No,
I
even
think I
then,
would
you're
be
starting Mason over him.
I would be speculative, willing to do that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think if I had Juju on my team, I would speculatively drop him for Mason as well. Just yeah, I would do that. I said the Steelers have a crap running back situation while owning Warren in like 3 leagues. I don't know how he didn't take over for Najee for week 6 once Najee only went for like 20 and 40 yards week 4 and 5. This is the Najee experience. Joe's lived it. We've lived it our
Oh,
whole
no doubt.
lives. It really seems like at some point in the season, Najee knocks off the rust from the rotors and gets moving just a little bit more. He's not good. Like his yards per carry is garbage. He is not a good explosive running back. All the metrics will tell you he's not explosive, and that's absolutely true. He does have a really terrible matchup coming down somewhere along the line soon, where I saw a chart from somebody on X, I can't remember it right away, where they were ranking like explosiveness versus the matchup, and it was like negative 13 points towards Najee. And I was like, but Najee's not explosive, so like how does that play a role? And he's like, well, you're right, that's true, still not a great matchup, but that it all plays in. I mean, Najee could go 15 for 30
And they'll still give him the ball 10 more times in the
and
second
they'll
half.
still give him the ball. Like,
Yeah.
like Warren is a good player, and they should give him more opportunities. Juan, who would you drop off the bench for a defense? Wandale, Jacoby, Madison, Mayfield, Etienne, or Downs. I still have DJ Moore, Jefferson, and Mooney. Brees Hall, Kyron, Kenny, and Darnold, Mayfield. I think that if I need to pick up a defense this week, that I'm either dropping Madison or Wandale. I think they're two expendable pieces to your team. Yeah. Madison's in a good enough situation where they are relying on him, and he is getting touchdowns. Wandale's not getting touchdowns. So if touchdowns matter to you, Wandale would be the guy that I would move. I wouldn't drop Etienne. I'd still hold Etienne, even though his situation hasn't improved. Just because I wouldn't be able to stomach dropping Etienne for a defense.
That's right.
Right. But I could stomach
Mayfield's also acceptable. But yeah, I would say Wandale. I mean, you also got the other possibility of doing the 2-for-1 trades that we love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to that point, Joe said Mayfield is an expendable piece. I mean, realistically, you only need to carry one quarterback as long as your quarterback's already experienced the bye.
Minnesota already took their bye, so yeah.
Who do you want to roll with? Traded Amon and Swift for KW3 and Nico. Traded Cup and Achane for Puka, Neighbors, and Cook. Are both of these wins, Xenon?
First one's a win for sure.
Your team is now Allen, Mahomes, KW3, Cook, JT, Kyron, Tyreek, Jettis, Neighbors, Evans, Nico, Nakua, Kittle, Kelsey. Dude, your team's stacked in a 10-man league. This is this is insane. Mm-hmm. If I could go out, and I remember talking to you, I believe you had Saquon a couple weeks back too. You're playing the law of averages here, right? All of these guys are good. And on a week-to-week basis,
if you can do Neighbors for CMC, I would do that.
I'd think about it.
Bijan. Neighbors would be the one of your group. Neighbors is the one I would want to move. I don't think you can get into Bijan with Neighbors, but I do think you can get into CMC with him. I would want to look into that.
Yeah, I mean, like this week especially. I mean, just thinking out loud right now. You're rolling Allen. You're rolling JT. You're probably playing Kyron. If you like the matchup for Cook, I could see Cook as being a good option this week against Indy's defense. Jettis is never going to leave your starting
everyone
lineup.
That was hurt when they're at no value. I love it.
Right? Jettis is never going to leave your lineup. When Nico comes back, he's most likely not leaving that lineup too. I think, honestly speaking, I mean, Tyreek, it looks expendable on this team as well. I like both. I like both of them. I would have rather have kept Achan, but I think getting Puka, Neighbors, and Cook and only giving up those two guys is absolutely an elite option.
Yeah,
And
there's nothing wrong with that.
And I think that you moved out of Swift, indicate, Kenny Walker, that's fine. And then I'm on for Nico. I'm okay with that. The guy was owned in 0% of leagues less than a month ago, scoring 20 to 30 points back to back makes me just want to trade. Yeah. I mean, for the question, Mr. Wumbo, when we were talking earlier, the question for Tillman was, do I trade Tillman for draft picks and in a dynasty? And there's reason to believe, like I said, that is a good pathway. It is very much unlikely that he continues at this pace. And it was the same thing we said about Chris Godwin in week 2 and week 3, is that when you have someone rolling at such a rip-roaring pace, is there are only two paths. You keep him because you think the pace is going to continue, or you trade him because you think it's going to fall off. So if you fall on, if you think he's going to fall off, that's fine, and he ends up staying good. Oh well, you still got a nice return on value. But if you keep him and he turns bad, then the value keeps going. It goes down. Like Ken Walker, his highest trade point value was that game where he just exploded against the Detroit Lions for 3 touchdowns. You cannot, Ken Walker now has fallen back. Today you have Puka and Nico at wide receiver, and you would be getting.
All right, so Bob, let's get through these, and then we'll do the deep dive, and then we might have to wrap up today.
He would be moving Hunt to get.
If you're getting Zay, I want to do it. Like I said, I want to be on side Zay of that trade, Tato.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. Today. I sent the Nico guy a message, but he hasn't gotten back to me. Just sent him a bunch of trades combining Devonta Smith, Pollard, McConkey, Tillman, Leggett, Hopkins in different ways. I honestly think that Tillman, like a combination of Tillman and Devonta Smith, probably will move you into Nico pretty easily.
I don't think I want to do that trade though. If you don't have one of the two of them on your bench, you definitely do that trade. But if you're starting them both, you obviously want to keep the starters.
And Juan here, I think that ETN is worth stashing?
Not really.
I mean, logistically, not really. But I'm not dropping him for a defense.
That's also true.
Okay, so if I'm dropping him for another player of positional value that I think is going to give me good returns in the now, then I'm considering it. I'm
really surprised they didn't trade him though, because he's a free agent. They ain't winning. What I guess the biggest problem is Dallas imploded. Dallas would have been the primary buyer of the running back,
and they didn't. Why
should Dallas pay anything for a season that's blown? Yeah.
For example, if Hopkins is still on your waiver wire, and I had to move on from ETN, but I'm sure there's other guys on your team that you can move on from. I honestly do. Elver, before we get into Jesse's deep dive here, MHJ for Najee. Nah.
Do not get rid of Harrison for Najee.
Nah, I'm not doing that. Despite everything I've said about Najee, I'm not doing that. But I do understand, Elver, MHJ is an impossible player to own. You have to start him most times. But you don't
Unfortunately, yeah. That's why he never should have been drafted in the first round. Would you start? Who do you start between Taysom or Otten? And would it be crazy to flex one of these two? So the guy I'm facing, A-Chain, Mixon, and he said he would trade A-Chain for Allen next week. Would you all do that, or maybe try London, Harrison, or Rico for A-Chain?
Okay. So the guy I'm facing this week has A-Chan and Mixon. He said he would trade A-Chan for Josh Allen next week. Well, I mean, the thing is, the game this week is the game you kind of want an A-Chan for, right? If he's jerking you around like that and saying, "Oh, I'll trade you him next week," well, the price goes up. I'm not giving you the same value this week as next week. That's right. If A-Chan goes off for 35 points, he's not gonna want to do this, and that's kind of where I fall on that. Is that he's probably doing it because he doesn't want to do it really realistically. right?
Probably.
He most likely doesn't want to do this trade.
He doesn't want to see buyer's remorse of who he just traded you beating him this week.
Right. And that's one of the things to think about. I mean, it goes through my mind as well when I look at teams and I go, oh man, like, oh, I don't want to get gobsmacked by AJ Brown this week if I end up trading AJ Brown. But you got to think about the long-term things for your team. And I would pressure him this week. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I would pressure this week to get into H-Chan. And I don't think you're being unreasonable.
Deadline tomorrow at noon.
What's the deadline? What's the
deadline?
I
make it tomorrow at noon, Thursday at noon, man.
Yeah, I mean
Thursday at noon, baby.
Like you can't sit there. That's my personal belief is that if he wants Josh Allen, then it's this week. Get him this week. Like, what are you waiting for other than that fear of having H-Chan explode all over your team? And I don't think that Drake London or MHJ or Rico will offer you any greater positional advantage for your trade, Jesse, insofar as that is true. Because you got to think about this, is that London now is on a dip. He's on the dip because he's injured, dealing with the hip flexor, could be a little bit. MHJ's on the dip because he had the good game. He's like riding the stock market, right? There's going to be highs and lows. The game should have been good. But like I said, It was not good because Kyler and this coaching staff did not make the connections they needed to make. Rico Dowdle, he could be in for a better situation. I mean, they're probably going to run him a couple more times a game than they did in the past. But none of those three players moves the needles for me if I'm an H-Chan owner. The player that moves the needle for me right now is Allen. And if I send you Allen and if I send you Josh Allen and Rico Dowdle and you say, it's this week or nothing, I think that causes a little bit of pressure on the person. And if you wanted to up the ante and say Allen and MHJ for H-Chan, that really would move the needle for that person. But if you're okay, Jesse, in waiting, then wait. But I don't actually think that person wants to do that trade. I think he's kind of jerking your chain about it, to be honest with you. And then Jesse here, to this question, who would you start, Hill or Otten? And would it be crazy to flex one of those tight ends? It wouldn't be crazy to flex one of those tight ends, Jesse. But what needs to be said, and Joe said it really well yesterday, is that when a new coach comes in, their goal isn't necessarily to use gadget players. And the Saints do have some credible tight end threats in Foster Moreau and Jawan Johnson. So this coach is brought in to try to win games, and the usage for Taysom Hill could be unique enough, and it's always unique enough that he's always worth considering as a start, right, Joe? Always worth considering.
Yeah, but I don't want to. I need to know who your flexes are, Jesse. But 9 times out of 10, I'd rather go with the running back over Taysom Hill. I mean, the Taysom Hill is just so hard to call when his volatility is going to be. And I just definitely think with the new coach, he's just such in trouble here. So, so it looks like one.
But here's the thing, too, Joe, and this is something that needs to be said, particularly about Taysom Hill. Rolling out last week, he had 4 receptions, 19 yards rushing, and a touchdown. And typically speaking, if Taysom Hill doesn't get the touchdown, he's not worth playing. So,
it's like most Saints.
Look at his other stat lines this year, and if you just look at the history, just going back, because this is a deep dive, just spending a little bit more time here on Taysom Hill. You look back, and let's look at Taysom Hill's best season, which was probably 2020 from a running back perspective, 2019 from a receiving perspective. He has passed the ball when he was the quarterback, which was
which year was he the quarterback?
What?
Which year was he the quarterback?
A couple years. It was really disgusting. But you go in and you look at his yardage outputs, and outside of this was back in 2022, outside of a game where he put up 112 yards, everything was pretty much like that's when he was being used primarily as a running back in 2022. Then you come back to 2023 where he was being used primarily as a pass catcher. You look at his running numbers, pass catcher in the early parts of the season, in the mid parts of the season. He also had a decent amount of rushing totals. So like you're looking at 9 for 63, 2 touchdowns against Indy back in 2023, 1 reception for 14 yards. But if he doesn't get that touchdown, you're looking at 49 yards receiving on 7 receptions, which is nice. But then you go to another week, he has 2 receptions for 15 yards or 2 receptions for 55 yards and then 26 yards rushing. And like he's so volatile, so unpredictable that when he plays, it's hard not to start him, right? But also you need to understand that it is just as likely that you get 3 points as you could 27 points because of his volatility is so low or so high. So if I'm starting like a Wan'Dale Robinson, if I'm debating between Wan'Dale Robinson, Tyler Algier, and like Jalen Tolbert, I'm rolling Taysom Hill. But if I'm deciding between, David Montgomery, James Cook, or like Devonta Smith or Deebo Samuel or something like that, then it's obviously those guys. So like Joe said, it really depends on who you have. Really depends. So Mr. Wumbo, so many people this year got really, really lucky that, you kind of fall your way into some things, and you can only start 4 out of 3 of them for the wide receiver and 1 flex.
Dude, that's not luck. That's paying attention to your waiver wire.
It's definitely paying attention and buying them on the right times, right? You've been with us for a long time, buying players at the right times, keeping players, even if they're not doing as well through that trade deadline. The Hopkins thing, the Hopkins and Leggett, like, it's funny because, you backdoor your way into a couple starting wide receivers by subtraction. And that happens. Clearly that happens a lot over the course of the last couple of years. Should I drop Deontay Johnson or Olave for Odunze or Leggett? I do think Deontay Johnson is worth dropping for either of those 2 guys.
Particularly Leggett.
I think that Leggett's situation is better.
Anything's better than Kyler Williams. Caitlin Williams, Harvard Holly says the name. He's about to implode. Once that wind turns on in Chicago, Williams will not be able to complete pass.
Bryce Young is not better than Caleb
he
Williams.
Will be better than the November and December version. And he will be. But again, Bryce Young will be. They will have a better passing game in Carolina during November and December than they do in Chicago.
And the thing about Rome for a couple weeks now has been one of those players that, do I drop him? Do I flex him? Do I put him in? Do I play him? He's sitting here with 1 touchdown, 44 targets, and everybody in Chicago is kind of sitting there at like 44 targets, right? So it's low volume. It's a low volume passing attack, and Rome has had 2 games over 100 yards. In those 2 games where he went over 100 yards, he had over, and this game particularly, 7 and then 11 targets. In the other games, anything below 7, and he's sitting there under 40 yards. So playing the Rome Odunze bus is, you have to ask yourself, New England, Christian Gonzalez might be the guy on him, or it might be on DJ Moore, probably on DJ Moore. Green Bay, Minnesota, Detroit, all susceptible to the pass, right? Then you come down and you look at Leggett, whose situation, like we said, just improves more, dealing with the same kind of targets, more touchdowns. But the target share has gone up. It's a plug and play kind of back end flex play starter. He also has the bye coming up. And then Kansas City, Tampa Bay is a good matchup. Kansas City is not. Philadelphia is not. Dallas is. Arizona is. So there's discussion that these matchups are going to play a role. I think I would lean towards dropping Deontay Johnson for Leggett, but I also could make a strong case to do it for Odunze. Taysom Hill either throws for like 100 yards through double reversal, flea flickers, fake punts, and runs for 80 and a touchdown on someone else's shoulders like a centaur, catches 3 passes for 30 yards. It's the case. That is the Taysom Hill experience. Joe and I, back when we first started this show, Mr. Wumbo, back when we first started the show, we interviewed some fan bases. And you should go back and watch the episode where we interviewed the fan from New Orleans. And it is just a really we called out Michael Thomas being a scrub and done, that he just needed to be off the team. But Taysom Hill, man, like
they
stuff
love
of
him
dreams.
down there.
The stuff of dreams.
They
Traylon,
love him.
All my players are on bye. It's going to happen. But guess what? They're not going to be on bye next week. So you only have to make it through this week. So a little bit tough at the wide receiver spot. Should I start Tolbert or Demarcus Robinson half PPR? My lean, and then you said or Yoshi Foss.
Or the iOS, yeah.
Yeah, I think my lean is Demarcus Robinson.
Me too.
I know it's not a sexy lean, but again, one ankle twist away, one wrist away from being relevant. And all of those are really low relevancy players, to be honest with you. Augusto, running backs are Hall, Kamara, Chase Brown, Dobbins, Hunt, Chubb. Love that. London, Lamb, Ridley, Jennings. Nice. Bowers and Hawkinson. Would you do Dobbins for Jaden Reed? Or what would you give for Myers or Debo? If
I would do looking at your roster
Chubb
here.
For Myers. I would do Chubb for Myers in a heartbeat.
Yeah, that one's an easy one.
That's an easy one. I would do that right now. If I wanted to get a little bit spicy,
I'd do Kamara for Debo. Maybe you get a little more in Debo out of it.
I wouldn't do that, but
I like Dobbins and Hunt the rest of the year. I'm totally cool with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with Hall. I'm okay with Hall and Dobbins the rest of the year with Hunt sitting in my flex if he's playing. I love Chase Brown. Chase Brown has showed out in a couple games here. So I'd have.
But my point is, if you're doing a trade, you need to get someone who you're guaranteed putting in your roster no matter what. I don't know Reed does that for you. I know Debo does.
Reed can. I mean, I still think Reed has some value.
You could also do London and Chase Brown for Debo.
No, I wouldn't do that. That's too much. That is way too much. Way too much.
You love Chase Brown too much.
No, I mean, just statistically, that's way too much. I mean,
I admit it. I am huge on Debo. I am.
I understand that. But for you this week, giving up Dobbins, I think Dobbins is really worth a start this week, but you have a lot of players that are worth starting this week. So I understand moving out Dobbins into Reed this week on the bye would be a nice decision to make. It's a fair trade. So if you're asking if it's a fair trade, it is a fair trade. Would I do it? I would consider it because your running back room is very strong. But I would much rather trade Chubb for Myers because those are both kind of back-end, kind of speculative plays. And if people wanted to buy into the Pacheco coming back, Hunt isn't as valuable vibe, you can move Hunt for Myers very easily. I want to get I really feel so, and this is the discussion to be had with Vegas, is that if Minshew plays, Myers is valuable. If Ritter plays, Myers is not valuable. So that's kind of the piece about that. So if you really want Debo, Augusto, what are you giving Hunt and who? I think if you do want Debo, a Hunt in London should get you into it pretty nicely. But I understand you if you don't want to move London, You might have to do Hunt, Ridley, and a piece to move into Debo. It just depends on who you value more. You will probably have to move one of those wide receivers. You might have to move one of those tight ends if you wanted to move Hunt. Dobbins and Ridley should be enough to move into Debo. Dobbins and Ridley should be enough to move into Debo. It wouldn't have been enough a couple weeks back, but it should be enough to move into Debo right now. You can at least give it a go. Absolutely. And Chase Brown plus Ridley would definitely be enough to get you into Debo right now. But it all depends on how you feel about London's injury, right? Because Joe stated about Ridley, the volume is going to be there now apparently for Ridley. So you could do with that information whatever you like, Augusto, but it still feels like Ridley is a piece that you could move off from. And then Joe's absolutely right. London is a piece you can move off from. He's one of those players that is on the cusp of that wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. Do I make a move? Do I not make a move discussion? And Debo has better high-end potential.
Sure does.
On a week-to-week basis than London, but the volume that London is getting is really, 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 really nice. Tavon Austin vibes. Yeah, 100%. I mean, more than that. He is one of the most unique players in football, and it's so sad when the coaching staff doesn't understand what the type of, like, when they saddled him at quarterback in that season, that was so disappointing to watch because he's a much better player than he is a quarterback. It was fun watching him at BYU though. Was wondering both of your rest of the season quarterback rankings. Where does Darnold or Geno Smith fall in those, Joe?
So I like that Geno Smith just keeps throwing the ball and throwing the ball. But I am getting the fear that the same thing that happened last year is starting to happen again, which is they're figuring him out. I really, really do love what Minnesota's doing with their coaching staff. So the answer is actually this. Because Metcalf's out, it's almost a no doubt it has to be Darnold. And that's just where I'm at.
Yeah, and where I'm at too is I'm on Darnold rest of the season. Geno's just throwing the ball, and he's on one of the most prolific passing offenses this year in terms of just volume. But again, that volume comes at a cost sometimes, right? Where you throw the ball so much, you are eventually going to get intercepted a bunch. And had he not gotten those 3 touchdowns and what was it, like 300 some yards this past week, Joe?
Had he not caught that deep one to Njigba, it really would have been a much different game.
Yeah, I mean, currently he's saying at 7th overall in the season, but it's inconsistent, right? You can't.
So Bob, I'm gonna have to bounce you relatively soon, so we're gonna have to speed up these quick hitters. Yeah. We only got a couple left.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm definitely on Darnold. Mostert or Irving, Miggy. Pains me to say. It's gonna be Mostert. Yeah. Mostert still has that role, right? Even though
he does.
After he fumbles or after something happens, he gets immediately in the doghouse because of Jalen Wright. But Irving is kind of in that same situation, right? The Irving will produce more yards. Unequivocally, I think that is the fact. So if you're looking for yards, I think Irving gives you the better chance to get yards. If you're looking for a touchdown, I think Mostert gives you a better chance at that, just from a standpoint like that. Benjamin, should I start Kareem Hunt or Pickens at the flex? Well, Benjamin, if you joined us a little bit earlier, and you can go back and watch as well, we did a lot of discussion about Pickens this week. Joe thinks, and Joe, looking at the stats and looking at our numbers, that Pickens is a really good flex option this week with a high ceiling, even with Marshawn Lattimore there. But Hunt is just so freaking solid.
Yeah, he is. That's a very good problem to have, Benjamin.
He's a rock solid option against a Broncos defense that continues to get gashed in the run game. Okay.
And just traded a linebacker away.
So I'm on Hunt because he offers a safe floor and just as high of a ceiling as Pickens does. But he offers a safer floor than Pickens. I'm on Hunt. What's up,
Are we
Roberto?
trading Jacobs and Reed for Bryce? Not at this point. I don't want Jets, man. I'd rather have Jacob and Reed.
So the thing about Jacobs that might be a little bit scary for you, Roberto, again, both of those Green Bay Packers are on bye this week. Jacobs basically didn't get used in the second half of that game because they were in catch-up mode. So the only thing you need to be concerned about, and I guess it's a good problem to have because you have the guy that's going to bring them back in catch-up mode, and then you have the guy that's going to be the workhorse if they're not in catch-up mode. So I don't see the benefit of owning both of these Packers. I really don't. I would decide on which one to keep. I wouldn't trade them both away, but I would decide on how you think these game scripts are going to go in the future of this season. So if you think the Packers are going to be behind a lot, then it would be worth considering trading Jacobs. If you think the Packers are going to be in the lead a lot,
Brees is also the wrong piece to go get.
Jacobs
just go to a different top end running back. We got a conversation.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I think you could, but I wouldn't. But I do like Brees' schedule this going across the rest of the season. I do like that, but I wouldn't give up those two players to move into Brees. Josh, trade Pollard for Evans. I own Achane, Bijan, Tracy, and Pollard. Pollard is a piece that's expendable. And Joe will tell you trade him before he breaks.
If the Jets are in.
Mike Evans is already broken. You know, the schedule looks good for Mike Evans in the future. This elevates your team to the next level. Pollard, realistically, if Tracy continues to be the guy that he has been, Pollard's probably not the guy you're going to be starting, even though his volume hasn't been a concern at all this year. But that is without Tajay Spears, right? Pollard's already dealing with a little bit of a foot problem.
I think it's a great trade.
And Coach Speak says we want to give him less volume because he's already dinged up. I don't like to hear that. I don't like to hear that at all. I'd rather go after Evans, and especially, that it's a good problem to be in. It's Mike Gesicki, Benjamin. Go back earlier in this episode,
no doubt.
Benjamin. We talked a lot about the reasons behind Mike Gesicki. If Higgins is out, Gesicki is the play. Pitts or Taysom. I think that I'm on Kyle Pitts. I'd have to look into this a little bit more for tomorrow, Josh. Taysom, we just talked about Taysom a little bit earlier in the episode. Taysom is going to give you a really high ceiling, but also a really low floor. Pitts has been turning it up in recent weeks. He has been performing. If London is out, he is a very reasonable position to say that he's going to have a good game. And if we go to PPR numbers, Joe, Hunt for Myers, Augusto, for your team, I think I could talk myself into that. I think
I would go with Myers, knowing that the Hunt train's going to not be rolling as long as it is, and Myers might be heating it up.
I think Hunt will continue.
And then would you rather roster to PPR Cam Akers or Jaylen Warren? For me, it's Jaylen Warren, no doubt.
Yeah, it's Jaylen Warren. To be honest with you, I haven't even considered Cam Akers since the end of last year. Yeah. If I can't,
so Wumbo, if you can't make the trade for Minko, should you do Devontae Smith and Pollard for CD? Yeah. I think that's a valid attempt. I think that's fair.
Yeah, Wumbo, I don't know if that gets accepted, but at least it gets the conversation going. So everybody in the chat, we want to get to Zai's DD here, and then Joe and I are going to be off until tomorrow. So
hit your tomorrow's is already posted. Put your questions in there. We'll start the show with them.
Absolutely. So Zai, we're going to get to your DD right here. And then we're going to be off, and we'll be on again at 3:45 Eastern to about 5:30 tomorrow. Zai, 12 team, half PPR. Got Love, Darnold, Henry, Saquon, Tracy, Mostert. Love that. Absolutely. Tyreek, Puka, Debo, Higgins, Quentin Johnston. Nice. Ingram, Kraft. Losing faith in Tyreek, Puka. Should I move on from one or both?
No, you can't. The way your roster is built, you can't, because you need both of them to start.
I'm less nervous, and I understand what we talked a lot about Puka's injury over the last couple of weeks. Um, and I would feel like if Puka hadn't got ejected from that game, this wouldn't even be a conversation.
No
There's
one.
really nothing. There's really nothing to be worried about with Puka. With this injury in the yes, the injury is a concern of the chance that he re-injures it, Joe, and we can look at the 6 score on Puka as well. But I really don't think that I'm moving Puka at all. I mean, the ejection was just unfortunate. It was an unfortunate moment in that game, and I'm not really concerned about that. When it comes to Tyreek, we talked a lot about Tyreek a couple weeks ago because Tyreek was a nice buy low with the potential to explode kind of wide receiver. He is doing well enough, but he is not returning that crazy value that we were expecting from Tyreek Hill this year. So while that is a majorly disappointing, it is not unexpected when we've been dealing with what we've been dealing with him over the past year, right? And so you look at where he falls in terms of points, of total points. Tyreek is still 31st in total points. So he's still a startable wide receiver in 3 wide receiver markets, right? Especially in 12-man leagues, right? And the guys above him, Lockett, Pickens, DJ Moore, Mike Evans, Jacoby Myers, Downs, Wandale, Marvin Harrison, all have similar-ish issues as he's experiencing, right? You look at what he's gotten so far, Joe, in the last 2 weeks, Zai, in the last 2 weeks, you look at this from a PPR perspective here, making sure my numbers are right. 12 or 13 points, 12 points. Already had the bye, okay? Already had the bye. There's going to be a huge bye week coming up. What is that? Week 12, week 14, something like that. And he's going to be in there, and he's going to be playing New England, Green Bay, Vegas, all that stuff. So I want
a lot of juice there.
I want you to not be nervous, okay? Pulling the trigger on trading Tyreek right now at not good value. I mean, the guy had 20 yards per reception, 12 yards per reception the past 2 weeks since Tua's been back. I mean, that's great, right? And I know we said Zai was the last question here, but Miggy coming in here with a quick hit. Yeah, you'd have to eat that bye, Mr. Wumbo, but I'm okay with it. Quick hit in my 8-man league. K. Dotton is still on the waiver wire. Should I pick him up? Yeah, you should pick him up.
Yes.
Absolutely. Pick him up. I got Kincaid and most likely throw him or Wandale Robinson on the bench. You're throwing Wandale on the bench, and you're probably messing around with the volume. You're welcome, Jesse.
Oh, you're welcome, Jesse.
Absolutely. Zai and Landon, I saw your question here, Landon. Landon is the absolute last question here because we do want to roll out by 6 o'clock here. What if I can get someone like Bijan or Mooney, or maybe get Chase or JJ? If I'm moving off Tyreek, or if I'm moving off Puka, the only guys that
You have to go the receiver route, Z. But JJ or Chase is the direction to go.
Yeah, the only guy I'm moving into is JJ realistically there, Zai, but I don't think you have to. I really don't think you have to. I think you're going to be settling in nicely as this season goes on. Landon, who should I try to trade Lamb for? I already tried Jefferson, but that was a no. So then don't trade him.
That's the answer.
I mean, and that's the piece, because the only other wide receiver market that I would want to be into with CD Lamb traded away would be Justin Jefferson, realistically speaking. Jesse, you're welcome. And Smitty, we can start the episode. Tomorrow with this. Because I love that these kickers questions are there. We appreciate you, Zai. We appreciate you, Landon, as well.
Kickers aren't real players.
My initial order on this my initial order on this, because I can't pass up a kicker question.
No, you can't.
I'm having Dicker, the kicker, out of that lineup. Dicker would be the guy I would rank number one. He has been very trustworthy enough. He faces the Titans. Both of these teams run the ball a fair amount. They also pass the ball fair amount, some better than the others. So it's Dicker